What is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back on the SP404 Mark II, and in this video in particular I want to explain to you guys the Bus FX and do a complete walkthrough of how that works. I touched on this topic in another video that I'd done recently, which was explaining some of the things that I don't like about the 404 Mark II. This was included in that, but I wanted to go over it in a bit more detail and explain exactly how everything works. I don't really want to pass too much judgment in this video, but hopefully you'll be able to see from yourselves the workflow and decide whether it's something you like or not. Personally, I find half of the Bus FX really useful and the second half of it quite convoluted, so I'll explain all that and you guys can see exactly what's going on. And just quickly before I start guys, my latest drum pack is available now for download. It's Hip Hop Drums Volume 1. I've chopped all those hits from records and drum loops in records, so if you could go ahead and check that out, I'd really appreciate it. The link's in the description below. Okay, so let's get into this one about Bus FX. Now the first thing that I want to show you guys before we do anything with Bus FX is that there's two options with the first half of Bus FX. In total there's 4 different buses for FX, and I want to start straight away by showing you something in the settings. So if you go to Shift and EFX settings, which is Shift and 16, this brings up the effects settings area. Now you can see here Bus 1 and Bus 2 are currently stacked on top of each other, so they're actually working in tandem at this point. But if you hit the push enter button, you can actually change them to be in series. I think that's the correct way. So I think that's parallel and that's series. May have got that the wrong way around, apologies if I have. So yeah, by clicking that you can change between the two, which basically means the effects are either stacked or you can choose separate pads for Bus 1 and Bus 2. So that's quite important to know before I show you the next part of Bus FX, because you need to understand that the effects are either stacking or they're working independently. So I'm going to have these set up independently first to show you guys how the assignment works for it. So I'll come out of that by pressing exit, and we'll leave Bus 3 and Bus 4 until later. I'll talk about that later. That's the second half of Bus FX, which I mentioned earlier in the video. So let's escape out of that. Now to access Bus 1 and 2, you use the Bus FX button right here, and you can skip between the two using this. If you're on Bus 1, it's a solid light. If you're on Bus 2, the light flashes. So that's a useful visual indicator. So let's go ahead to Bus 1. So let's say we want some 404 vinyl sim. We'll do MFX and 14. And I'll take the noise off for now because we don't really need that. And now that we've got that effects up, we can hit remain, and you can see here that the pads that are highlighted in orange, they're assigned to Bus 1. The pads that are highlighted in white aren't assigned to a bus at all, and to highlight things and have them use Bus 2, they need to be green. So currently pad 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 and 10 on this bank are using Bus 1. And if I want to go ahead and assign things to Bus 2, you actually have to change to Bus 2 and then hit remain, and then you can see here I've highlighted 13, 14 and 15 in green. So in this mode, which I showed you in the effects settings, when they're running alongside each other, not stacked, you can have 2 effects running at the same time using Bus 1 and 2, and they can be doing completely different things. So for example, you might want to do EQ on your drums, and you might want to do 404 vinyl sim on your samples. So let's go ahead and actually do that. And yeah, you don't have to use things inside the MFX list, you can use these top buttons as well. And now if I flick between the two, you can see it says 404 vinyl sim and Bus 2 says isolator. So let's go ahead and set these up. And there you can hear and see that both the effects are working at the same time, and they're both doing independent things, which is really, really useful for making beats. So then if we go back into the effect settings and change it to this configuration, Bus 1 and 2 on top of each other. Now if you use the remain button, all you can do is turn the effect off or on. So if I hit remain, you can see they're all orange. If I press them again, they go white. So basically now it's saying, do you want both the effects stacked on this pads or do you want none at all? So if you're in this mode, you only get the choice to stack and you don't get the choice to use them independently. So like I've mentioned already, you have to go into the effects settings and change the setting here if you want to flick between those two things. So for Bus 1 and 2, that's essentially everything that you need to know. I tend to have one effect on Bus 1 and then use Bus 2 as a kind of improvisation channel or bus. So maybe I'll have 404 vinyl sim on that, say if I've got a full resampled loop, and then bus 2 will be where I can hit DJ Looper and do effects and use isolator like on the fly and use delay while the other effect is still stacked on the top. So that's how I've been using it so far. Now, bus 3 and bus 4, this is the bit which I don't like. I find it's quite convoluted and it's just weird for a couple of different reasons, I think. So if we want to use bus 3 and bus 4, bus 3 and bus 4 are essentially effects that just get applied to absolutely everything. So you can choose what they are, but they will stack, and they will also stack on top of the other buses that you're using as well. You can see that from the diagram and the effect settings, that it's kind of just like an effects chain, essentially. Now, the thing that I don't like about bus 3 and bus 4 is that you can't choose them independently. What you have to do is choose a favorite. Now, I did talk about this in my other video. So here you can see I've flicked to favorite 1, and there's 16 favorites in total. Obviously, you can build your own favorites, which is really useful, but in order to use bus 3 and bus 4, you have to have a favorite assigned to these two. You can't go into bus 3 and bus 4 in these tabs and assign effects to them. So say if you wanted to make a new one, you'd either have to find an empty favorite or you'd have to overwrite a previously saved favorite. So say here we've got cassette and 303 vinyl sim. We'd have to go into bus 3 and change that. And this is another weird thing that I don't like, is the fact that here now we've got this kind of table layout which is completely different to the way that MFX look when you're assigning them normally. So I don't know why they've decided to have a completely different interface for doing exactly the same thing. So if I just quickly hop out of this and go to an MFX, say 404 Vinyl Sim, you can see here this is the layout that we get. We get the just quite a plain and nice and easy to understand thing. This is also easy to understand, obviously, but it's a completely different layout. We've got the 2 layers. Some effects do have 2 layers, by the way. So I'll actually go into the cassette effect here. Let's turn off that hiss. You can see here there's arrows pointing down, which is suggesting there's another layer underneath, and you hit the push enter button to access the second row. So yeah, when you're going into bus 3 and bus 4, they're actually just all there available to see, and that's where you have to do the changing of the effects. So if you're wanting to tweak effects on bus 3 and bus 4, it gets pretty slow. It's not a very nice workflow because you're having to go into effect settings, scroll across, get the right bus, then you have to scroll down. You only have to highlight it, so you only have to make sure those dotted lines are underneath. But yeah, I don't like that. I find that convoluted, and yeah, it's just a bit odd that the layout is different in this section, but I guess they had to do that in order to fit it into this screen. So bus 4 is exactly the same. You scroll across to bus 4 and you can assign various effects to it there. As far as I'm aware, you can assign every effect that's on the machine. So let's just have a look through the list. If we go to bypass, and yeah, there we go. That's the full list, basically. So we've got everything that we want available in there, but I just find that area of things a little bit tedious. So once you've got those set, obviously, they're stacked on top of whatever else you're doing, and you can have whatever effects you want stacked on the top. So let's go and set up something here. I'm going to do... we'll put a bit of reverb on. I just want to make sure you guys can actually hear what's going on. So I'm going to put some reverb on bus 3, and then we'll go across to bus 4, and... maybe I'll just do some equalizer on that, and I'll scroll down and we'll take all the high out, just so you guys can definitely hear what's going on. Okay, so you can hear there both the effects were applied to the overall sound of the unit. It doesn't sound particularly good, but it's just an example. Hopefully it shows you guys how it works. Now again, if you want to go ahead and turn those bus effects off, with bus FX, you have to go into it and hit the MFX button. That bypasses bus 1 and 2, and then if you want to turn them off on bus 3 and bus 4, you have to go into this menu and scroll across with this wheel basically until you go to bypass and you're not on one of your favorites. There is also the option to switch over the buses, which I've not found a practical use for yet, but maybe if you're just experimenting with sounds, it's quite useful. So if I just quickly show you what's on bus effects now, I've got cassette and scatter, doesn't matter what they are for this example. If I hold remain and hit bus effects, it's now changed to scatter and cassette. They've swapped the buses over. You can also do shift and mute, and you can mute bus 1. So depending on what bus you're in, you can mute it. So if I wanted to go ahead and mute bus 2, I'd have to go into bus 2 and then shift and mute bus, and it mutes bus 2. So that could be quite handy. Say you want to drop the drums out and you've got them set up to bus 2, but you want the samples to keep playing. That's an easy way to do that. You could also do it the other way around as well, so that's kind of a practical use for that. So as far as I'm aware, guys, that's everything about Bus FX. I'd love to hear your opinions on this layout. I know it's kind of divided a few people. A few people mentioned that they like the idea of having favorites, and the way that it's set up they quite like. Other people have said they don't. So I'd love to hear on this particular video what your thoughts are of Bus FX in general and whether you think there could be any improvements. Also, like usual, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to answer them just because there's a lot of comments coming on the channel at the moment, particularly about this new device. But yeah, please leave a comment, and also other people in the community around this channel do chip in and help as well, which is great. So someone may answer your question even if it's not me. So this is me checking out for this one, guys. That was Bus FX on the SP404 Mark II. Keep making beats on whatever devices you're working on right now, and I will be back with more content very soon. Peace!